I carried Celia's younger daughter, Anna Maria, as we took the last escalator to MoMA's 6th floor. Anna Maria, or A as we often shorten it, was still only 3 years old then. Margaret, on the other hand, was a big girl. She was 5. Margaret led all of us, standing first on the escalator, followed by Celia and then me with Anna Maria in my arms. Before Anna and Margaret, I hadn't been around small children in, perhaps, decades. My extended family never left Medellin, and I was an only child, so I was always astonished by how small Celia's girls were. Their limbs felt like fleshy twigs. I was always so afraid I might accidentally snap one of them apart. And they ran with those tiny legs, always running, in the studio, across the museum's floor, across the new elevated park that changed Celia's neighborhood so much, always running. I called the two of them my little birds. When Margaret was even smaller, I would set her on my left shoulder and I would call her my little bird, my little parakeet, my little macaw. And I did this with Anna once Margaret outgrew my frame. The two of them, in their high-pitched chirps, would call me Uncle Vicente. I enjoyed having a family of sorts, a young family, because in New York it can be very easy to find yourself single in your 40s. I was 46, and I realized that I probably would not have a family of my own. So these little birds became my nieces. When we reached the 6th floor, it was quite busy for a Wednesday morning. The newspapers had called the show historic, magnificent, a blockbuster. I was surprised that Celia didn't make plans to see it sooner. The show had already been up for a week. The four of us stood in front of the introductory wall text. Margaret held Celia's hand while Celia summarized for her daughters. For over 35 years, this relentlessly adventurous artist has created an eloquent and provocative body of work that resonates deeply in our visual culture. Cindy Sherman masquerades as a myriad of characters. She explores how identity is created. How are things represented? Is the camera lying to us? I turned to Celia, trying to gauge her emotion, her reaction to the words. I worried she might be upset given her own relationship with the museum. How no one at the MoMA had ever called her adventurous or eloquent in such large print on a wall. How the museum's Film and Media Board had voted against acquiring Boxers a decade earlier. No matter how important Boxers was to the art world and everything that came afterward. I was shocked then, but she was not. She swore that she never even gotten her hopes up. I'm not so sure. Though she did seem unconcerned at the Sherman exhibition. At first. After reading the wall text, Celia merely smiled and looked down at Margaret and asked, "Are you ready to see the first woman who will live forever?" Celia coughed into her arm and then turned to the door. The four of us walked into the first gallery where all of Sherman's untitled film stills were displayed. Celia asked all three of us, or no one at all, "Can you believe that they're all here?" She coughed again. The pictures were too small for Anna Maria to really care about them, and Margaret craned her neck trying to view them, complaining about them being hung too high. I picked her up as well, holding both girls at my sides. As we moved from one image to the next, Margaret asked, "Is it all the same person?" We saw Sherman as a career girl perturbed by something over our shoulders. Sherman as a bombshell glancing out her window with long legs arched on the sill. Sherman as a girl on the run waiting for someone to help her down the road. The four of us intruding on Sherman as she fixes her hair behind a bathroom door. "Yes," I said. "It is all Cindy. She has many wigs." Margaret considered this for a moment and asked, "Is it like your pictures, Mom?" And Celia said, "My pictures? Apparently, Margaret meant when you played dress-up. Celia, as far as I knew, didn't show Margaret or Anna much of the work she did prior to her films. Her early photographic work. Much of that was inspired by Sherman and other women artists working in the 70s. Some of Celia's early pieces, the nudes in particular, were considered quite risque. Now, I don't think Celia had any problem showing the girls other artists' nude works, but in the end, however, most mothers and fathers, I suppose, become mothers and fathers, not wanting their children to see them in compromising positions. "Ah," Celia said. "Have you been looking through my old catalogs?" "Ancient catalogs," I said. Celia shot me a raised eyebrow, not wanting to be reminded that we weren't exactly young anymore. "What?" I said, and I laughed. "Those are from before we even met each other. Long before I worked for you. It's ancient history." "It was a long time ago," she agreed. "But it's probably more like mine were similar to Cindy's. She did come first, by a few years. And actually, I think I wanted to be Cindy when I was in college, just like I wanted to be Anna Mendieta, or Carolee Schneemann, or Hannah Wilke, or Claude Cahoon. When you're young, you need to try on a lot of different personas to see what fits. And, well, I mean, look around. Cindy made a whole career out of doing that." She waved a hand at an image of Sherman dressed as Caravaggio, who himself was dressed as Bacchus. I couldn't tell for sure, but I sensed that she may have felt Sherman did not deserve so many accolades for, as she put it, trying on a lot of different personas. But then whatever emotion was in those words was lost to a hacking cough she tried heaping into the crook of her arm. I asked if she was okay. She still coughed into her arm, and her eyes were watering from behind her elbow. People began to stare. She said, and kept on with her hoarse cough. She tried holding back this horrific bark as she expected us to follow her into the next galleries. Sherman's fashion portraits, the centerfolds, the fairy tales, disasters, sex pictures, the grotesque, the history portraits. And then Celia said, "There's very little from the 90s here." We stood in front of Sherman's recent work. She was dressed as all those women of a certain age, the high society types who Celia had essentially spent the past 2 decades trying to appease, or was forced to appease, so that they would buy her work. It was always interesting watching Celia interact with these women, the philanthropists, the bored housewives who had wealth we simply could not understand. Celia did not change her personality for many people, but she was always so accommodating to these women, her wealthy patrons. Maybe Sherman was telling us she was slowly becoming one of these women as well, as she aged and accumulated so much wealth herself, and had become such a household name. Celia was not a household name. The last person who had mentioned her name on television was Johnny Carson, and he had died years earlier. In some cultures, a person's spirit fades away once the last living person forgets them. But in America, the spirit fades away once your name is no longer spoken on television. All of these wealthy matriarchs that Sherman had created, Celia essentially knew them all. I looked at Celia staring at all these portraits. Her eyes watered, just a little. I don't know if it was from all of her coughing or if she was truly tearing up, saddened by these women before us, the women who hadn't been able to come through for Celia's most important works, the women who couldn't convince the rest of MoMA's film and media board to acquire boxers, or anything else. It's astonishing how her most important, monumental works had never sold. The art market is so stupid now. If something sits out for a while, unbought, the collectors steer clear of it like a rotting sturgeon. Though I am not sure if that's why Celia stopped working on her third monumental piece. It had been more than a decade, and she still hadn't finished it. She had slowed her pace even more after the girls were born. She no longer wanted to feel as if she wasted time making films and sculptures and photographs that were merely easy sales. But without the manic production schedule, the money began to dwindle. Many of the props from her third epic still sat unused in her studio. All these women Cindy had created on the walls, they had come through only so much for Celia. They could not give her the opportunity to continue making the works that meant the most to her, the works that could cement her place in history. And that is why I believe she was not tearing up merely due to her terrible coughing, which she was doing again at that very moment. But then she proved me wrong again. She said, "This is all so simple, though also not. It's just her. It's almost always only been her. I think her dad snapped a couple of the early pictures on a road trip, but that's all, and she had set everything up herself anyway. And the costumes and the makeup, it's such a simple way to say something so incredibly complex. And you don't need any of those terrible wall labels to get something out of this." She took in the room around us and said, "Cindy's retrospective should be taking up the entire floor. I don't understand why it's not using the entire 6th floor. What is this? Do you think it's only spread across, what, maybe only 2/3 of it? The dekooning show they just had here used the entire space. When they give a man a show up here, they let him blow his load all over the museum, like Kippenberger, or Orozco, or Sarah. But when they give a woman a show, they try to squeeze her into the tightest space possible." She was not coughing. She was carrying Margaret, who was loosely wrapped around her neck. So I felt like it might be okay to finally ask, even if her eyes were still wet. "Do I detect some resentment, Celia, for never being allowed here yourself?" And she said, "Resentment?" And I knew immediately that I had misunderstood. "God, no," she said. "Vicente, this is amazing, whether or not she was given the space she deserves. You know how rare it is for a woman to get a retrospective like this, and here? And she's not even close to dead." I could tell that she tried very hard to not cough, but she couldn't hold it in. She had neither arm to cough into because she still carried Margaret. So I lunged toward her and pulled her daughter off of her, and then Celia began coughing horrendously. Beads of sweat dotted her hairline, and I just stood there holding on to Margaret. A stranger approached Celia, saying, "Miss, do you need water?" Though the stranger did not appear to have water. Celia moaned, "I'll be back," before she ran off to the down escalator, feverishly searching, I assume, for a water fountain. Margaret, Anna Maria, and I stood at the top of the escalator, staring down at their mother rushing between people, coughing, quieter and quieter the farther she went away. And then she disappeared completely, deep in the bowels of the MoMA. And all the strangers around us soon forgot she'd made a sound.